My name is Chastity Wells Armstrong, and I'm your mayor here in the city. And I just want to welcome everyone to our Immigration Resources and Information session this evening. I want to start out by thanking our Kankakee Public Library. They are wonderful partners, and anytime we host events, we always are able to get assistance. So Steve Bertrand, if you can raise your hand. Steve is our executive director. And I saw Vicki floating around, so I just want to thank the library staff for their help. Thank you to, is Lorania here? Lorania Lara? Right in front of me, hello. I'm focusing. Lorania is an ambassador here in the city of Kankakee for the Hispanic community, and she is always very helpful when we are putting together events, when we need to reach out to the Hispanic community, and when we're coordinating events. So I want to thank you for your assistance in getting the information out for the event. I also want to thank Martinez Tacos, I think they left, for providing refreshments for us today, and there are some refreshments in the back of the room for you. And I want to thank the city staff. Maya Graham, where are you? Raise your hand. Maya is a recent graduate of University of Illinois, very proud to hire a young person from the community. She's serving as our community outreach and marketing coordinator. Sometimes I mess up the title. Did I get it right? Okay, good stuff. Nichelle Smith is our newly hired executive assistant to my office. She's in the back at the sign-in table. So happy to have her. I haven't had someone in the office for 3 months, so I'm really glad to have her. She started this week. Our deputy chief of police is here, Willie Hunt. If you can raise your hand. He's the friendly guy with the pastel-colored shirt in the back there. So we are a team. And it takes a team to pull together community events. So I want to thank each of you, Maya, Nichelle, and Deputy Chief Willie Hunt, for being here. Finally, I want to thank Congresswoman Robin Kelly, who represents the city of Kankakee in the 2nd Congressional District. When I contacted her to let her know that I wanted to partner on this event, she was very responsive and suggested that we include Congressman Luis Gutiérrez, who represents the 4th Congressional District and serves as an exemplary advocate for the Hispanic community. I just want to mention for Congressman not to leave because Lorania would like to make sure we get a picture of you and Lorania. She was so excited when I told her that you were going to be here, and I said I will make it happen. So don't, Congressman, don't have me messed up now. Make sure you get a picture with Lorania. So I want to thank both of you, our members of Congress, for being here. I used to work for 2 members of Congress, and they cover a lot of territory. They have about 700,000 constituents in their respective districts, and it's hard for them to be everywhere. And so when they get to come, when people say they're on recess from Congress, lay people think, oh, they're out, lollygagging, but they're covering their district. They are working their entire district. So I want to thank both of you for taking the time to be here tonight. And at this time, I'll go ahead, and your staff. I don't know where the staff are, but I want to thank all of you, the congressional staff, because I know what that means and the work that you do. And so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and call up Congresswoman Robin Kelly to the stage. Oh, you could have went. Yeah, so you could run around. This microphone is so weird. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Mayor. When she calls me, I try to get on it right away. But so it's a pleasure to be here. Since President Trump took office, his administration has issued executive orders and memos intended to instill fear, confusion, and anxiety in our communities, from his travel bans and his decision to terminate DACA to his plans to increase federal immigration jails and cruel policy of ripping families apart. The president has one goal in mind: the intimidation of immigrants, refugees, and communities of color. The administration's immigration policies have increased immigrant arrests by more than 40%. However, under the Trump administration, they are not targeting criminals. They are targeting anyone and everyone, people who lived in our communities for decades, working hard and raising their families. I've had many people come to my office, meet with my staff. I have an office in Chicago, in the south suburbs, and the mayor allows us to have an office in City Hall. And we've had many families come to see us about their concerns, and my staff and I also have gone to the detention center in Kankakee. This outrageous roundup of people is flat out undemocratic, especially when those being detained are wrongly criminalized, as is happening to residents all across the Chicagoland area and Kankakee. This administration's roundups are not based on criminal history, as past administrations did, but rather on the profiling of minority communities. My faith and my conscience prevent me from supporting Trump's inhumane immigration policies. How can anyone support a policy that takes babies from their mother's arms and locks toddlers in cages? These are just unjust and cowardly assaults, period. I know this is extremely difficult and a trying time, but my team and I want to help. If you have an open application with immigration and have not gotten an answer in a timely fashion, or if you have not been treated fairly, my office can assist you. You can contact my office at 708-679-0078, and we will leave cards. And I know Luis is in the back, one of my staff members. Wave your hand, Luis. And Rick Bryant. I stand with all of you, and I will do everything within the authority of my office to support you. It is now my true honor to bring to the stage my colleague, Luis Gutiérrez. As the mayor said, he is the guru of immigration, just a very caring person, has traveled the country to try to raise the votes of immigrants and help the undocumented, and he's just a fierce leader. So I'm fortunate that he lives in Illinois and that he could get to Kankakee. We've been trying to do this actually for a long, long time, so I'm glad the mayor, reminded me again that it's time to do this. So without further ado, my colleague, Luis Gutiérrez.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman Kelly, and Madam Mayor, thank you for hosting us this evening, and thank you all for coming out. It's a pleasure to be here. So someone asked me if I've been to Kankakee. Yeah, I stop on the way here when I go to Champaign-Urbana for 4 years. This would be like the halfway point for me from my house, and I'd always get hungry. So so you know, I always participated in the economy of Kankakee, mostly coming and going. And we don't have any Steak and Shake, those little restaurants out in Chicago, and I like their milkshake, so you have one out here. Having said that, I just want to say, first of all, Mayor, we are so lucky to have Robin Kelly in the Congress of the United States. We are so fortunate to have her presence, her voice, and her commitment there. So when the Congresswoman asked me to come out, I said, certainly. We want to come out, and we want to be able to talk to people in your district. When she speaks about immigration reform, she's taken the votes to support our immigrant community. She's taken the stance, and she's raised her voice. And I just wanted to take a moment to come out here in front of her constituents to say to Congresswoman Robin Kelly, thank you. Thank you for being such a great guiding light in the Congress of the United States. Keep her there, keep her strong, and if you're going to do anything with her, promote her up the chain so that she can do better for other people, for more people. So, look, I understand you have questions, so I'll give a brief kind of synopsis of the state in which we find ourselves around immigration. I want you to think of a kind of an extended metaphor, right, of this administration and how it treats. So immigrants, to me, are but one part, right, of this president's promotion of division among the American people. And I say that with lots of reserve. He began his campaign for president saying Mexicans are murderers, rapists, drug dealers. Yeah, there's a few good ones, but not enough that we should keep any of them here. Now, you're going to say, Luis, did he really say that? Go find it on YouTube. It's there. He came down the stairs. Those were almost the first words. He didn't come down that staircase and say, I'm going to bring health care for all. No, he's going to reverse health care and the health care we were able, Robin and I, under Obama, to bring to people. He didn't say, I'm going to make sure, that there's health care and I'm going to eliminate and then I'm going to bring people together. He didn't say. He started with a message of these people are a problem and I'm going to put them in their place and I'm going to rid America of them. And vote for me if I do, so that I can get that done. Now, he complained about Obama's executive orders. And yet, as Congresswoman Kelly has already advised us, that's exactly what he does, executive orders. But I just want to compare real quickly the executive orders. So let's give some historical context, Mayor, to executive orders. Emancipation Proclamation. That was an executive order. President Lincoln. He didn't go to the Senate and the House. They didn't have committee hearings, have a vote, have a majority, overcome the filibuster in the Senate, and he signed the bill. No, he said, in America today, this is what needs to happen. Now, we have to change the Constitution of the United States after the Civil War to guarantee all the freed black men and women the right to American citizenship, but he started with the executive order. Second one, Truman. He took the armed forces of the United States, and in 1948, through an executive order, did what? He desegregated the armed forces of the United States. Can you imagine with the Dixiecrats in Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina? He couldn't get Republicans to desegregate the armed forces. He couldn't get Democrats to desegregate the armed forces. Yet he did that. Now, 1964, we caught up, and what did we do? We passed voting rights, civil rights. But first there was an executive order. And I think that's kind of Obama. Because we passed the DREAM Act in the House of Representatives in 2012. Yeah, we passed it. It passed by a majority. Because they keep saying, oh, they're doing these things because there's not a majority. No, there was a majority. And then we went to the Senate. 57 people voted for cloture. That means a majority of the Senate said, end debate so that we can pass the DREAM Act. But we needed 3 more votes. Because it isn't like half plus 1. It's 60 votes in the Senate. So what did we understand? That a majority of the U.S. senators wanted. So what did Obama do? He signed an executive order basically doing what the obstructionists in the Senate and in the House would not do, and the will of the American people. Now, please note that there are about 800,000 dreamers. They're with us. They're in our schools. They're our doctors. They're nurses. They're your children's school teachers. They permeate our very way of life. They are everywhere. And what did they get? They got to pay $700 so they could get a work permit so they could work. That's all they get. They don't get, they confuse us, right? Oh, they're voting. No, they're not. They're not voting. They can't vote. They're on welfare. No, they're not on welfare. They don't qualify for any government assistance. They do qualify for one thing in terms of the government: pay every last cent of taxes on any income that they have. Put money in Medicare and Medicaid, and guess what? If when they're 65 we haven't fixed this problem, they don't get a darn cent from that and their contributions. So it is an avenue that I am joyous and I am happy that President Obama took to allow them to come out of the shadow. These are children of immigrants who came here undocumented and were raised in and they've been through our public schools and they go to our colleges, and we've incorporated them. So what did the president say? Oh, I got to get rid of that. Really? You have to get rid of it? It worked. One of the things about this president, Republicans, what they will tell you, says, oh, we have all those illegals. You know who creates illegals? You know who creates illegals? That's the term that they use. I'm going to use their term. The undocumented, they do. They create it. By rescinding the executive order of President Barack Obama, you took 800,000 people who put their fingerprints, took them through an FBI background check, and they paid for it themselves, got a card so they could work, went to school, graduated from college, and you said to them, you're undocumented. So don't talk about what. Those people were documented. Temporary protective status. About 60,000 Haitians are under temporary protection. Why? Because there was a hurricane there. And what we all know, the president, he does 10s on hurricanes, right? And 100% and an A+, unless you come from the island of Puerto Rico, and then there are thousands of people that die. But my point is this. They have temporary protective status. What is that? That is a status that you give people that are in the country if there is some tragedy, some event in their country of origin, and you don't want to send them back there. This is the richest country in the world, the most powerful country in the world. Why would we want to send 60,000 people back to the poorest part of our hemisphere at this particular point? There's no rationale for it. They're integrated, they're learning, they're here. We should take a step in the right direction. So I share you what this president does in terms of immigrants. And let me share one other thing, and then why don't we just, I hope I've encouraged you enough through my statement that you want to ask questions or you want to counteract or you want to have a discussion and a dialogue. A dialogue, that means we talk to one another and we're respectful to one another. Let me give you the last one. American citizenship. Oh, and then, they said, oh, those Hispanics, those Mexicans, they don't want to learn English. They don't want to really be part. They want to change America. They want to transform America. They want to make it into something that it's not today. Well, if that's true, Mr. President, why are you building a wall around 1 million people who want to become American citizens? I want to repeat that. Why are you building a wall around 1 million people who are legally in this country, legal permanent residents, and building a wall around them who want to become citizens? You say, Luis, what are you talking about? Under Obama, we got it down to 6 months. That's from the moment somebody who's a permanent resident of the United States submits an application and says, I know enough English to pass an English test. And I know enough about the Constitution that I will put to shame 8th graders trying to pass Constitution. Because, seriously, it's hard. It's hard. If we all took the, and me included, we took the test, we'd be like, really, I got to take this test? You know what you say to yourself? Thank God I was born in America. I don't have to take the test. Because it's a tough test. It's a rigorous test. It should be. These are people who said, I want to be part of this country. I want to renounce my allegiance and my fidelity to where I was born, and I want to say, this is my country. And thousands of them are in the armed forces of the United States as we speak today. They're serving as permanent residents in the armed forces. They want to become citizens. You know what it is now? 16 months and growing. Lastly, I want to say, and just so you know, you can't say it's a budget problem. Want to know why? No money can be allocated by the Congress of the United States of the American taxpayers' monies in order to facilitate citizenship. I know you're astonished. No, you can't use a cent for it. It must all come from the fees that are incurred in the process. So they're paying for it. Why would people who want to learn English and prove to you that they're English proficient and that they love this country and they've learned, why would we want to stop them from integrating? They're here legally. No, that's what we're doing. And so I am going to, on January 3rd, I begin with the National Partnership for New Americans. And I'm going to travel throughout this country, and I'm going to help break and tear down that wall so that we can get the million of them to become citizens of the United States, yes, by November of 2020. That's my goal. And guess what? There are 79,000 of them in Puerto Ricans, in Florida, along with another 200,000 new arrivals from Puerto Rico. Yeah, I'm going to register them to vote, and I'm going to help the ones that need to become citizens, make them say, and I'm going to spend lots of time in Lancaster and Kent and all these little small towns in what? Pennsylvania. Yes, I'm going to Pennsylvania. I'm going up to Wisconsin, where Mr. Trump won by 17,000 votes. And we're going to help 21,000 people become citizens of the United States, and we're going to register a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans that had to run from the island of Puerto Rico because this government did not respond. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help in the process of democracy, right? I'm going to register people to vote. I can't tell them how to vote. I suspect how they're going to vote. And I'm going to help people become American citizens. I'm going to do that for the next 2 years. And then after that, I'm going to invite Robin and her husband, right, to come and walk the beautiful beaches of Puerto Rico with me. But before I get to do that with Robin, I got to do my job through November of 2020. So yeah, I'm leaving Congress because I'm taking on a new task. And I think it's an important one. And I hope you will all help your neighbors become citizens. You will register them to vote. It is one of the greatest things that we do as American citizens, is promote our democracy. And I want to thank the mayor again for hosting us here this evening, and to Robin Kelly for having me come out here. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll get to questions at the end. So today's event, if you don't already know, is about coming together and sharing helpful information. I want all of you to understand that you have a mayor that seeks to work with everyone in this community and seeks resources to help our residents. The congressional office is a resource, and you will learn about services the congressional staff can provide for free of charge as related to forms, information regarding a path to citizenship, fees, status, dates, and so on. You will hear about the work being done in Congress to address immigration policy. You've heard some of that already. You'll learn about your rights in the workplace. You'll hear about the work of the city and how my administration is working to be inclusive of our Hispanic residents. Finally, at the end, you will have an opportunity to privately speak with congressional staff and or city staff to address any questions, concerns that you have and provide any feedback. So with that, I just want to share that I was born and raised in the city of Kankakee. And like most cities, Kankakee has become more diverse. Currently, our city is 39% white, 39% black, and 20% Hispanic. As your mayor and a social worker, I believe that all people should be treated with dignity, respect, and have access to opportunities. In other words, shared opportunities, shared resources, and shared responsibility for our community. In honor of Hispanic Heritage Month that is celebrated September 15th through October 15th, I wanted to make sure the city of Kankakee acknowledged this time. As your mayor, I have worked to be inclusive and expand access for Hispanic residents. During our city council meeting held on September 4th, I presented a proclamation to the Hispanic Partnership recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. We have started rebranding our city with a logo and evolving website. On that website, you will see photos. They include residents from our Hispanic community because we want to highlight the diversity of our city. The website translates to Spanish and other languages. Social media posts are posted in English and Spanish. I have visited our dual language learners at Steuben Elementary School, giving them bookmarks and encouraging them to read. I have diversified the committees, boards that are appointed by the mayor. Our library board, our planning and zoning commission, and the mayor's advisory committee now have Hispanic representation. We continued the Hispanic Citizens Police Academy, and I participated during that graduation ceremony. We have diversified the police force. Of the last 3 hires, 2 have been Hispanic males, bringing our total Hispanic police force to a total of 6 officers, which is approximately 10% of our police department workforce. Please note that I believe our police department should reflect the community that it serves, so we will need to continue recruiting Hispanic officers and especially Hispanic female officers. I joined the Hispanic Partnership, and when I'm not able to attend, I make sure that the city is represented at meetings and during partnership activities. I sponsored a $500 scholarship for a Hispanic student. Scholarship event will be held this month, I think on September 27th? September 27th. I will not be in attendance. I'll be on a beach. It's my anniversary. But please know that I support you. I host regular meetings with Hispanic residents. During one of those meetings, I found out how detrimental the loss of the Hippocrates Medical Clinic was to the community. Lorania has helped me work on that issue. And as a result of that, I've worked with our lobbyists in the city and the lobbyists for Dwayne Dean and Rincon Family Services with Victor's support as well. And we were able to get that clinic reopened. A ribbon cutting to celebrate the reopening will be held during the week of October 25th. October 25th. I have donated personal funds to pay utilities at the clinic, recognizing this important resource in our community. During July of this year, I was sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation to attend a mayor's conference on business and entrepreneurship in Kansas City. And what I learned from across the nation is that Hispanics are a growing part of our population, as we all know. 12% of U.S. businesses are Hispanic-owned. Hispanics start businesses more frequently than other groups. And if they have access to capital, they will contribute over $1.2 trillion in revenue. Hispanic businesses fail more frequently because they do not understand the IRS code, business culture, and finance. The city of Kankakee has a strong partnership with Kankakee County Chamber of Commerce, and that's led by our president, Barbie Brewer-Watson. The city is committed, and we will continue working in the community and with the chamber to identify where supports are needed and help leverage resources to support our Hispanic business owners. Overall, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Know that I want our city to be a place where every resident can dream, grow, and thrive. And any support that you need from us, please let us know, because it's time for us to move Kankakee forward, and all of you are a part of that. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to call up a representative from Heartland Alliance, Juan. And he's going to share some information, and then we'll open up for questions.
Good evening. My name is Juan Arguello. I am an attorney at the National Immigrant Justice Center in Chicago. We are a nonprofit organization that provides legal services both with USCIS, which I'll get to in a second, but also the Immigration Court in Chicago, which has jurisdiction in Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois, of course. Sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for inviting me to talk with you all. And today or tonight, what I will be talking about is focusing on your rights when someone has an interaction with the Department of Homeland Security, more specifically with ICE, whether it be at their home, at their place of work, or when they're out in public generally. After that, I'll also talk about the beginnings of what happens from when someone is arrested by ICE and are taken into detention, and I'll get into the starts of that. It's a long process, but I wanted to focus on those two aspects. So, as a bit of a primer, so when we're talking about immigration and immigration enforcement, there are a lot of acronyms involved, as with any type of government entity. So the main one is Department of Homeland Security, or DHS. So DHS is the department of the government which ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, falls underneath. So DHS is one way to think of it is like the very large organization when it comes to enforcement within the United States. It is ICE along the borders and ports of entry. The enforcement agency is Customs and Border Patrol, which is CBP. And then finally, the last part of the government that interacts with the immigrants throughout the process is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. The acronym is USCIS. This is an organization or part of the government where applications are sent for visas to apply to become a legal permanent resident. There are lots of applications that can go to them, and it is separate from Immigration Court. So Immigration Court, which I practice in front of, is part of the Department of Justice. It's not its own branch, like the judiciary branch when we all think about it, and we think about government, the executive branch. the legislature, and then also the judiciary branch. With immigration court, it falls underneath the Department of Justice, which is why the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is able to influence and to offer guidance to the immigration judges, and he has done so recently in the news. If you followed, he's issued a lot of new cases where he has made his own ruling to try to influence how the immigration judges in the Department of Justice act. So today I want to go over what you can do, and I'm going to talk about your rights when you're interacting with ICE, whether you are an immigrant or not an immigrant. It's important to know what your rights are and what the rights are of other people, because sometimes if you are a citizen, it's easier to assert those rights than someone who may be afraid of doing so in public. And if you are an immigrant or know someone who is an immigrant, whether they're undocumented or not, it's important to learn certain words and learn what your rights are, so that if you find yourself in that situation, you'll know how to react. And there are some phrases that are simple phrases, but they will help you tremendously if you find yourself or a loved one finds themselves in that situation. And it's also important to know to report what you see happening. If you see members of ICE conducting raids or traffic stops, just reporting them, and you can report them to the National Immigrant Justice Center or other nonprofits, and I'll provide some contact information for that. Just because at the National Immigrant Justice Center, we have attorneys who focus on litigation to try to curb abuses by DHS and ICE, and to make sure that they are aware of the rights of immigrants. And the only way for us to know that is if members of the community reach out to us, and then we can go from there. All right. So, your rights. You have the right to remain silent. If you are interacting with a member of ICE, it may be hard to tell if they are a member of ICE, but you can ask. If they're a member of the police, often they will be wearing equipment that says police on it and won't necessarily identify themselves clearly as members of ICE, but you can ask them if they are members of ICE or Immigration and Customs Enforcement or DHS, or if they are members of the local jurisdiction police force. And the right to remain silent, as it is for citizens interacting with police, also applies in the immigration context. So it's important, if you wish to remain silent, to exercise that right, and to do so, you need to say that you wish to remain silent. And if they continue to press you, to put pressure on you that you need to answer them, just know that you do not, that it is completely your right, your constitutional right, to remain silent after identifying that you wish to remain silent. I know it seems kind of strange to enforce the right, you have to say it, but that is what you have to do. You also have the right to speak with an attorney. Now, in the immigration context, unlike the criminal context, you do not have an attorney appointed to you, but you do have the right to talk with an attorney, and you can let them know that you wish to talk to an attorney if, after you say you wish to remain silent, things continue to progress. It's also important to know that you should not sign anything. You do not have to sign anything when you are taken into custody of ICE. And especially if it's not in your native language. But even if it is in your own native language, if you sign one of the documents that they present to you, it can have repercussions for your case going forward. So you do not have to sign any of the documents that they put in front of you. Another item is that if you are in your home, you do not have to let ICE officers into your home unless they have a judicial warrant, which is different than a lot of the warrants they usually use to enter homes. I know it might seem like a legal technicality difference between the type of warrant that they use versus a judicial warrant, but the main difference is a judicial warrant has to come from a judge who is separate and apart from their own agency, whereas the warrants that ICE uses needs only be approved by an officer in ICE. So they are fundamentally different, and the ICE warrant does not have the same impact as a judicial warrant. So if ever members of ICE come to your home and they knock on your door, and we'll get into this a bit more, but you do not need to open the door for them unless they have a judicial warrant, and that they show you that judicial warrant before you have to open the door to let them in. And finally, just broadly, you also have the right to request a local telephone call. So this will be important to memorize phone numbers. I know it's hard, especially people from my generation, to remember numbers because we have cell phones. So it's just easy to put it in there and kind of forget it. But it's important to have a couple of phone numbers memorized just in case someone's taken to ICE custody so that they can let their loved ones know where they are, and they can start the process of reaching out to a nonprofit like the NIJC or private attorneys to try to assist them. So basic vocabulary, things to know. As I mentioned, one of the, especially in the home, if they don't have a warrant, they can't come into your home unless you let them in. So one phrase it's important to remember is, do you have a warrant? In Spanish, another way to say this, or the way that it would be important to say, is tiene una orden de arresto. Aside from that, and we'll get into all of these phrases a little bit more and unpack why they're important, but another one is, am I under arrest? And in Spanish, is si estoy bajo arresto. And in conjunction with that, am I free to leave? Puedo irme. To assert your right, it's important, once again, to say, I wish to remain silent, or quiero permanecer en silencio. And it's also important to note, if you or someone that you know is in immigration proceedings, that they have the right to ask to see an immigration judge. Someone, for the most part, cannot be removed from the United States if they have never had an order before, if they request to go in front of an immigration judge. So that is a right that they have. All right. So I want to go over 3 scenarios in which the public can come in contact with ICE. The first one, as I mentioned, was at your home. Things to remember is, do not open the door if ICE comes knocking on your door. They will knock on your door and they will tell you need to open the door. They may do so aggressively, pounding on the door, come back multiple times. But it is important to know that unless they have a warrant, a judicial warrant, they cannot enter your home unless you let them into your home. So you're completely within your rights to, first of all, not open the door, and then if they continue to persist or to knock on the door and tell you to do so, to ask to see the judicial warrant, to see the warrant. And if they can't produce the warrant, or if they only produce a warrant that has been signed by another immigration officer, you do not need to let them in. And you can ask them if it's a judicial warrant or an ICE warrant. And if it's just, like I mentioned, if it's just an ICE warrant, do not let them in. Once you open the door, it'll be more difficult to not answer questions. Or if you let them into their home, you still can terminate their access, but it just becomes more difficult. So we advise just not opening the door and talking with them through the door to find out if they have a warrant such that they have to be let in or not. After that, at work, there have been an increase in workplace raids, and it's important to know that when you're at work, I think some of the most important things to remember is that you do have the right to remain silent, but even more than that, you have not been stopped by ICE. You are at your place of employment. You should ask, and one of the first things to do is ask if you are free to go. If you are free to go, you should walk away calmly and leave the area. What you should not do is, if there is a raid, try to flee. Because if you try to do that and you're stopped by ICE officers, it seems like that's an indication about your citizenship status. So they can use that as a grounds for arresting you. Because otherwise, if you don't do that and you don't answer any of their questions about where you're from or where were you born, if you don't answer any of those questions, they will not have grounds to believe that you're not a citizen. And if without those grounds, they cannot arrest you, or they can't legally arrest you. And that becomes important if they do so anyway, because in front of the immigration judge, with the help of attorney or without the help of attorney, you can move to have the arrest, the evidence that they got or the arrest suppressed because they did not have a legal basis to do so. And I know it seems quite technical, but by following these tips, it'll put you in a better position to fight the unlawful arrest later or just be able to leave. A lot of the times people don't know what their rights are, so if you don't ask if you can leave, you'll feel that you have to answer the questions, and in answering those questions, it's possible that they'll be able to arrest you because you say that you're from another country or that you're not a U.S. citizen. So it's important to remember that you have the right to remain silent. You do not have to answer their questions, and also to ask before asserting that right if you're free to go. If you're not under arrest, you should be free to go. If they say you're not free to go, that's when you would invoke your right to remain silent if that's what you wish to do. And then after that, they would need, because the burden of showing that someone's not from the United States is on the government at first. So they need some type of proof that you are not from the United States. The final scenario is just in a public place. ICE does not need a warrant to search public places. They do need one or the permission of the employer at a place of work. But in public, they do not. If you are stopped on the street by an ICE officer, once again, you should ask if you are under arrest. If not, ask if you're free to go and walk away calmly. Otherwise, you can invoke your right to remain silent. So in the event that someone is detained by ICE, I want to briefly talk about this. And if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. But what will happen if someone is detained by ICE, they will be taken to a processing center, the nearest one where they are detained, and they will be processed. They will likely remain detained until they go in front of an immigration judge who will make a determination if they're eligible to receive a bond or not. In order to determine if you're eligible to receive a bond, it'll depend on your ties to the community, to see if you're a flight risk or your criminal history. But without getting too much of the technical aspects of that, sort of what family members can do if one of their loved ones or someone, a friend or a coworker is detained and they're trying to locate them. So some resources you have is you can go online to and just type it into Google, ICE detainee locator or ICE detainee locator, and what you'll need is the person's name, date of birth, and country of origin or where they were born, and you can try to locate them that way. And if they're in the system, it'll show which detention center they are in. There are several centers where they can go, and unfortunately, it has nothing to do with where you're close to. So, for example, someone from Kankakee may not necessarily be sent to the detention center here in Kankakee. They could be sent to Dodge County in Wisconsin or all the way down south in Uline, Illinois, about as far south as south goes in Illinois. So it's important to be able to know that you can find them online, to be able to see where they are. And if someone is detained, something that's very important to know is for them to memorize their A number and to give it to their loved ones or a friend, because that's the way that lawyers and other legal professionals are able to easily locate them and communicate with members of ICE about that person. So the alien number, or the A number, is an identification number unique to each detainee. In addition to that, as far as preparing, it's important for everyone to have a plan, but especially for undocumented immigrants, to have a plan, an emergency plan for what will happen if you become detained by ICE. It doesn't make it feel any better, but it's going to help you if that happens, that your family's prepared as best as they can be, and it's one less thing to worry about in the moment of crisis if someone is arrested by ICE. So what we suggest is identify someone who will take care of your children if you have them, and also who has access to your assets, or whether it be bank accounts or just to your apartment or to your home, so that if you are detained and they need to get, for some reason, either you need money to help with an attorney or the attorney needs certain documents, that they're able to get into your property. So it's important to find someone that you trust to do that. And obviously with your children, it's the same thing, that you want to make sure that your children are taken care of if you are arrested by ICE. The second thing is to update your emergency contact information at children's schools and with their doctor. Thirdly, apply for your children's double nationality if they have it, and their passport, and verify your options with your consulate. Just in case it comes to that point where you may have to return, and if your children were born in another country but you brought them here very young and they don't have any documents, you just want to make sure that they can have those travel documents in case it becomes necessary. Similarly, with documents, it's important to gather important documents such as birth certificates, your own birth certificates for your children, tax records if you have them, anything that can account for the time that you've lived in the United States, to have those collected somewhere, because those are documents that will be helpful for you in the immigration court proceeding if you are in one. And finally, to save money, make sure your bank account is connected to a debit card so that you can have access to it in another country if you are sent to another country, and make sure you have access to online banking. And I think that is all I have right now. Yes, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take some now. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that if somebody's detained, then they do see a judge, but I think you said they may or may not have an attorney. How does that work?
Yes.
No, go ahead.
So they may, whether you have an attorney or not, is not just, it doesn't matter if you have an attorney or not. You still have the right to see a judge. The reason why some people have attorney and don't is because, unfortunately, right now, there is no appointment of counsel for people who are detained. So in the criminal context, if you can't afford an attorney is appointed to you. That's the public defender system. Unfortunately, throughout most of the country, there's no mandated program where if you are unable to afford an attorney, that one's appointed to you. So if someone's unable to hire a private attorney or obtain an attorney through a nonprofit organization, they still have the right to go in front of an immigration judge and to fight their case. It's just they may not have one. That's as far as they could appear without it. But also, if someone has an order of removal previously, they do not have the right generally just to go in front of an immigration judge. The exception to that is if they have a fear to return to their country, they should let the ICE officers know that they have a fear to return to their country. The next step is they'll have an interview, and during that interview, they'll talk about what they're afraid of in their country. And if they receive a positive determination from that interview, they have the right to go in front of an immigration judge to present evidence and to make to state the reasons why they can't go back to their country.
But possibly without an attorney.
Yes. So yes, unless they're able to obtain a pro bono attorney or can afford to pay a private immigration attorney, they would do that pro se by themselves.
And you're also saying they have a right to see a judge? Do they automatically see a judge?
So they don't automatically because if someone doesn't want to fight their case, they can just agree that they are removable, and then they'll be removed. So before they go in front of a judge, they can waive that right to see the judge.
Could you restate the organization you're with, and is this information on the website?
Yes. So I am an attorney in the National Immigrant Justice Center, and this is an organization in Chicago So let me look. The pages got a bit mixed up, but we provide a lot of different types of legal services. So I myself work in the detention project. So I work with people who are detained and appear in front of the immigration court in Chicago. Some of my colleagues work in a different project where they represent people who are not detained and do all different types of applications, such as a U visa, which if someone is a victim of a crime and they cooperate with local law enforcement, they can obtain status that way. Yes, it is. All this is on the website. Mm-hmm. So the question was, has there ever been a right to have an attorney appointed in these types of cases? Is that correct, sir? Yes. So right now, the only situation when that happens is if someone is deemed to be mentally incompetent, and then the court will hold a hearing, the immigration court will hold a hearing, determine if that person is able to understand the nature and the proceedings of the case. If they are not, then the court will appoint an attorney to assist them throughout the case. Aside from that, no.
The real question here is 99% of immigrants are not going to have a lawyer. You should just know that. You can. He's given us a wonderful presentation, and if you're lucky enough to get him, you're one of the very few. There just aren't lawyers. Very few people have an attorney. When people do have an attorney, their success rate increases, especially for asylum cases. And they know that. So you do not have the right to an attorney. There are children that are 2 and 3 and 4 years old before immigration. They don't have an attorney. Now, if an adult can't understand the complex, and if you just listen to this attorney, you can see how complex it is given his. Now imagine you don't understand the language. Imagine you're a child separated from your mom and your dad, which we all happen to know happens in America, right? That's how you see the judge. So I applaud the work of all of the pro bono attorneys and the Heartland Alliance and everybody for the work that they do. But we have to understand that ICE agents don't respect half of the things that he talked about. They wear vests that say police. And you do have to open the door to a police officer when they knock on your door, right? And people get confused. You don't know, are they the police or are they ICE? I don't know if you've seen them. They wear jackets that say police. So the very government lies to you. Because if you're the police, then you should. ICE is not. ICE is Immigration Control and Enforcement Officer. They are not the police. Everybody knows what the police. They write you parking tickets, right? Right? We know who the police are. You dial 911. Do you get an ICE agent? No. You get the police. So there are rules, regulations, and training when it comes to the police, but that's not ICE agents. That's why many people call for the abolishment of ICE, right? I'm not one of them. I want to make that clear. I voted against the creation of ICE. I think ICE does deplorable things. But when you allow the subject to go to that, here's what happened. I'm going to show everybody what happened. Tell me if you agree. In America, everybody was talking about dreamers. Everybody. And we were winning the argument across America. And then everybody was talking about what? The horrendous treatment of those moms and the separation of their children. Am I not right? Every night. And Donald Trump didn't know what to do with himself. And then somebody decided the smart thing politically to do was to make let's abolish ICE the call of the land. And what happened? We stopped talking about the kids. We stopped talking about the dreamers. We stopped talking about, because all we're talking about is another subject. That's what they want to talk about. You want to abolish ICE, you have to abolish Donald Trump. Okay? This is clear and simple. Because you need a president in the first place that will not use. You abolish ICE, you just heard them. What are they going to do if they abolish ICE? They're going to call the Border Patrol agents who now can not have to be simply 100 miles away from the border. They can show up in the city of Chicago. As a matter of fact, they're showing up in cities already. They'll just, I don't know, deputize the National Guard. They will find a way. Everybody remember abolish the IRS? You see how far that got. So what you have to do is restructure and reform the IRS, right? You have to restructure and reform. I voted against it because it didn't make sense to me. Immigration control and enforcement next to USCIS. So I'm going to share an office space, and my boss, the same boss that's going to help me become a citizen, is the same boss that wants me deported from the United States. It makes no sense to have them both in the same department, right? So understand that this was created this way. We had to fight Democrats, because we had to fight Obama, because Obama was deporting a lot of people. But what happened? We educated the president, and then we had what were called priorities. Well, I was with Mr. Robles yesterday over at the ICE offices in Chicago. Who's Mr. Robles? Mr. Robles is a father of 2 American citizen children, and he's an auto mechanic, and he's never, and you know how he came in contact with ICE? Because his former wife, who was an American citizen, applied for citizenship with him. The relationship didn't work out. The application was there. He showed up on their radar, and now they want to deport him. He subsequently remarried. He has 2 children, American citizen children. Never, right? No, nothing, no violations of the law. So that's what they are doing. And so I want to thank the attorney for advising us of the rights, but you should understand, they will lie. The ICE agents will lie. And they will look like they're not ICE agents when they knock at your door. They will act as though they are the police. And so what we have to do is restructure the system completely. And let me tell you how we did that. In 2013, under the leadership of President Barack Obama, the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform. They did. And you know what that did? It was going to allow 11 to 12 million people to come out of the shadows, right? Report to the government, give their fingerprints, go through a background check, learn English, work. And 10 years later, right, after they've worked and they've shown and they followed all the law, 10 years later, they could then apply for a green card, which is going to take them, any lawyer will tell you, take them another 2 years. So maybe 12, 13 years after they join the program, they can get a green card. And then 5 years after that, so we're already, everybody following it, 16, 17 years, they could have become an American citizen, right? That seems to be a pretty rigorous process, right? And part of the reason that rigorous process was in place, you want to know why? So that those that followed the line, right, and were in the line, right, were not skipped over by the 11, 12 million that were undocumented. Because that wouldn't be fair either, right? Let's say it was your brother and your sister. Let's say it was your husband, your wife, and they were in line already. And you say, well, how are you going to put 11, 12 million people get ahead of my wife or my brother or my sister? So we fixed it. All the arguments they made about skipping the line and getting at the front of the line, we skipped all. I always think they were going to jump straight to American citizens. We skipped all of that. And we made sure that they went through a rigorous process. And you want to know something? That was the right way to do things. That wasn't amnesty. They said it was amnesty. That wasn't amnesty. That was you saying, I'm going to get right with the law. I'm going to give you my fingerprints. I'm going to pay for you to take my fingerprints. And then we're going to go through a very rigorous background check. And if after 10 years of me paying my taxes, working, behaving, learning English, learning the Constitution, because at the end of the 10-year period, you had to take an English test. Then I get to get a green card. And then after that, after a 5-year period and that, I get to become an American citizen. So you see, citizenship wasn't first. Their integration into our society was first and foremost in comprehensive immigration reform. And that was the kind of process. Can I tell you something? We never got a vote at it in the House of Representatives. You want to know how many senators voted for it? 68. So that means there were a lot of Republicans and Democrats. And let me tell you one last thing. Remember that I want to build a wall? You know what the last amendment to that bill was? $40 billion for border security. $40 billion for border security. So we did what we had to do comprehensive immigration reform. And what this wonderful, talented, committed attorney has shared with us today is a very trying process. And it's good. If you get him, grab him. Hold on to him. Because I wish every immigrant had an attorney just like the one that has come here before us today, because then they'd have a chance. But they really don't have a chance. The system is really stacked against them. I can take 2 questions, and then, Mayor, I have to go, but I don't want to leave without taking any. I know, and it's very, very complicated, because then a lot of people think that we just don't want anybody, right? That it's a free-for-all. That is just absolutely not the case. Whether it's been Democrats working with Republicans and working together, we have always worked. Now, if you have 11, 12 million people and you say, you're not going to deport them, right? Everybody knows that's a fantasy, right? You're not going to take 11, 12 million people, put them in, and deport them along with their 6 million American citizen children. You get my point, right? It's not going to happen. It's a fantasy. So what you have to do is address it and say, what is security? To me, part of security is saying, okay, 11, 12 million, you're working, you're following the rules, go through a criminal background check. Put your fingerprints on a piece of paper. Tell us where you live, tell us the name of your children, tell us who you're married to, tell us what you own, the car, tell us everything about yourself, and we're going to put you through a rigorous and if you come back clean, then we're going to say, here's a work permit. Don't ask for any government assistance during those 10 years. Remember, the first 10 years, you pay taxes. It's a very rigorous process. Most Americans would say, well, that sounds right to me, that somebody would go through that process. But we cannot go through that process. And if we did, we would take millions of people. Listen, everybody, we would take millions of people, set them aside. They're registered with the government. We know where they live. We know who they are, right? Every year they report, once a year. Then the ones that are left, right, we might find some bad people there, right? And that would make us a safer country. Because, and I'm sorry, I got to go because I just want to say one last thing. Look, everybody, I didn't send my kids to go work in the fields in Oregon, or to go to Washington State to pick apples, or to go pick grapes in California, or onions in South Texas, or broccoli in Georgia. I didn't do that. I'm not saying that that is not work that is meaningful, right? And that is necessary, and that we should also pay homage to. It's hard, back-breaking work. But everybody in this room, we have to come to a realization of one thing. The 2 million people, 80% of them that work and do that back-breaking work in the fields are undocumented people in the United States of America. And if you actually deported them all, you could not go to your grocery stores and find any produce or anything in the vegetable and the produce aisle. And meatpacking plants, they would disappear. And I know a lot of people say, well, those are not jobs Americans want. I assure you. And you examine yourself whether you're sending your kids to school. But guess what? Somebody's got to do it. And either our food is going to be picked by foreign hands here in the United States of America, or our food is going to be picked by foreign hands in a foreign country. I want to keep America independent and make sure that America is the food capital of the world. Number one, it makes us strong, and number two, it keeps us independent. So let's understand that it's all combined. It's complex, right? It's very difficult, as you heard from the attorney, just trying to explain what you do when you come in contact with them. Imagine it's even more complex than the IRS. So I want to thank the mayor for having me here. I want to also thank this wonderful attorney for making the wonderful presentation, and Robin Kelly for being a great congresswoman and my colleague, and most importantly, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.